John Carter had always believed that a person's success should come from steady effort, not shortcuts. When he was young, he worked 3 jobs at once to support himself. When he grew older, he built a construction consulting company from a tiny office with 1 flickering lamp, a second-hand desk, and a stubborn sense of determination. Years of dedication eventually brought him stability, trusted employees, reliable contracts, and a reputation for fairness in a city where fairness was often missing. At home, John had what he valued even more. His wife Emma was the calm strength behind his long days, and their children Lily and Ethan had a way of turning every evening into something warm and hopeful. Their household wasn't luxurious, but it was full of small joys, drawings taped to the refrigerator, soccer balls rolling across the hallway, and weekend breakfasts made with too much syrup. As the company grew, John faced new challenges. Competitors appeared. Deadlines tightened. Clients demanded more. He needed someone who could help carry this growing weight. When a new associate, Claire Weston, joined the firm with her polished resume and confident energy, John felt relief. She proposed new opportunities, new investors, and new methods to streamline operations. Her ideas seemed beneficial, and her results, at first, were impressive. Emma, however, sensed something John didn't. She wasn't jealous or suspicious, she simply noticed details John overlooked. "She's moving quickly," Emma said gently. "Make sure you understand everything she's doing." John nodded but didn't think much of it. Trusting people had always been his strength, and his weakness. He believed that good intentions built good outcomes. He believed that a person with enthusiasm and ambition should be encouraged, not questioned. He didn't know that Claire saw his trust not as a gift, but as an opening. He didn't know that behind the polished reports and perfect explanations, she was quietly rearranging the foundation of the company he had spent half a lifetime building. The first signs were too small to worry about. A contract missing a page. A payment delayed. An investor asking an unusual question. John brushed these off as normal business turbulence. But turbulence, when ignored, can turn into a storm. And John was walking straight into one without realizing how quickly everything he loved could be swept away. Claire Weston worked with a level of confidence that impressed everyone around her. She seemed to know every answer before the question was finished. She carried herself like someone who had already succeeded in half a dozen ventures. Investors admired her, employees trusted her. John appreciated the way she handled problems before they reached his desk. She filled his schedule with meetings and new opportunities. She prepared contracts that looked perfect. She pushed for faster growth, telling John this was their moment to take the company to the next level. And although her pace was intense, her results appeared effective. The company's numbers rose. Client interest expanded. Everything looked promising. But Emma's instinct remained unchanged. "John, you're signing a lot very quickly," she warned. "Don't rush. You've always been careful." John reassured her with the same words each time. "Everything is fine. Claire knows what she's doing." Yet, as months passed, John noticed things he couldn't explain. Some financial statements didn't match his records. A few clients complained about changes he had never approved. When he questioned Claire, she answered calmly, almost too calmly, saying they were minor accounting adjustments or miscommunications she had already resolved. John wanted to investigate, but the business was moving at such a rapid pace that he felt he couldn't slow down without losing momentum. He trusted Claire's explanations and signed more documents, believing he was building a brighter future for his family. Unbeknownst to him, Claire had been setting up shell companies, rerouting funds through them, and using his signatures to legitimize her actions. She was careful enough that John never noticed her digital fingerprints until it was too late. One evening, Emma placed her hand on his arm and said quietly, "John, you're tired, and when people are tired, they overlook things." He smiled and kissed her forehead. "I promise, everything is under control." It was a promise he believed at the time, although the ground beneath him was already beginning to crack. The storm that Claire had created behind polished spreadsheets and confident smiles was about to break open, and when it did, John would learn that trust, when given to the wrong person, can cost far more than money. It can cost the life you worked so hard to build. The collapse came without warning. John arrived at the office one morning expecting a routine day, but instead found 2 government investigators waiting for him. They introduced themselves politely, but their tone left no room for misunderstanding. They were holding documents, dozens of them, filled with transactions, transfers, and contracts bearing John's unmistakable signature. He felt the floor tilt beneath him as he stared at numbers and dates he had never seen before. He told them there must be a mistake. They told him the documents were verified. He said the signatures weren't his decisions. They replied that they were still his responsibility. Within hours, his business accounts were frozen pending review. Long-term clients withdrew agreements to protect themselves. Partners paused all cooperation. And Claire was gone. Her office was empty. Her phone disconnected. Her email inactive. She had vanished, leaving behind a trail of fabricated paperwork and financial traps that led directly to John. He returned home late that night, exhausted and overwhelmed. Emma stayed awake waiting for him. He sat at the edge of the bed and told her everything, every detail he could remember, every document he signed, every doubt he had ignored. Emma didn't yell. She didn't accuse him. But her silence was more painful than any words. She understood his nature too well. John trusted people because he believed in their goodness. But this time, that belief had cost them everything. John spent the next week meeting lawyers, answering calls, and watching the company he built crumble under accusations he never imagined facing. The house, the savings, the investments, they all began slipping away like sand through open fingers. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat. He couldn't stop blaming himself. And when he looked at Lily and Ethan, he felt a weight so heavy he could barely breathe. He had promised them safety, stability, a good life. And now they were witnessing the collapse of everything their father had built. Emma finally sat him down and said gently, "We'll get through this, John. But the children need routine, and they need space from the chaos." For the first time, John understood that losing the company was only part of the fall. The rest was still coming. And it would hurt far more than losing money. 2 weeks later, John moved into a small apartment at the edge of town. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. The family home was being evaluated as part of the financial investigation, and Emma needed a stable environment for the children. John didn't argue. He accepted the situation as the consequence of his decisions. His new apartment had 1 bedroom, a squeaky floor, and a window that looked out over a parking lot instead of a garden. He unpacked his few boxes slowly, a few clothes, basic dishes, and framed drawings from Lily and Ethan. He placed the drawings on the table because they were the only things that made the room feel alive. Every morning he woke up to silence instead of his children's voices. He made instant coffee instead of Emma's warm breakfasts. And each night he sat alone, wondering how he let everything slip so far out of control. Still, John called the children every evening. He asked Lily about her art projects, and Ethan about soccer practice. He apologized often, though he wasn't sure they fully understood why. Emma spoke to him politely but distantly. She didn't blame him cruelly, she simply needed to protect the children from the emotional storms swirling around their father. John spent his days visiting offices, answering investigators' questions, filling out forms, and searching for small consulting jobs. His reputation had taken a severe hit, and many people who once praised him now avoided him entirely. He kept reminding himself that rebuilding would take time. That honesty mattered. That patience was a form of strength. But at night, the silence felt like punishment. He had lost his company. He had lost control over his life. And he feared that he might lose his family if he didn't find a way to prove himself again. John saw Lily and Ethan on weekends. The first visit felt fragile. The children were happy to see him, but they also sensed something had changed. Lily hugged him tightly but asked, "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan stood close but watched him carefully, as if afraid to break something already damaged. John took them to the park, the same park they used to visit when his world was stable. They fed ducks, laughed at squirrels, and ate ice cream. Slowly, the children relaxed, and John felt pieces of himself return, pieces he thought he had lost when the company collapsed. When he brought them back home, Emma stepped outside for a moment. She wasn't angry. She wasn't distant. She was simply cautious. "They had a good time," she said. John nodded. "I'm trying to be consistent. They deserve that." Emma softened slightly. "John, none of this changes that you're their father. But you need to rebuild your own stability too." He understood. She wasn't closing the door on him. She was asking him to rebuild himself before trying to rebuild what they once had. John returned to his apartment that evening and sat quietly for a long time. The weekend had given him hope, small but real. He taped another drawing Lily made onto his wall. It showed the three of them holding hands. "You're still part of their world," he whispered to himself. "You can't give up now." For the first time since the collapse, John felt a spark of determination. He had something worth fighting for again. Something worth rebuilding for. Just as John began piecing his life together, a new problem emerged, one he never expected. One evening he returned to his apartment to find the front door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but drawers were pulled out, papers rearranged, and messages clearly read. On the kitchen table sat a note. "We need answers. Contact us." It wasn't from investigators. It wasn't from Claire. It was from people involved in the financial chain Claire had used. John realized they thought he still had resources or information. They didn't understand he had lost everything. Fear washed over him, not for himself, but for Emma and the children. He called the number on the note. A calm voice answered, asking questions John couldn't fully answer. He told them he had nothing left. They said they would stay in touch. The pressure didn't come as threats, it came as presence. A car parked across the street for hours. A figure standing too long near his building entrance. A feeling of being watched. John didn't want to involve Emma or the children. He didn't want them to know danger might be circling their lives. He knew he needed help. Someone he trusted. Someone who understood the business world well enough to see through the chaos. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in years. Michael Hayes, a former partner known for his level head and loyalty. With a deep breath, John pressed call. "Michael! I need help," he said, voice strained. Michael didn't hesitate. "I'm coming tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in months, John didn't feel alone. Michael arrived early the next morning, the same steady presence he had always been. He looked around the small apartment, took in John's tired face, and simply said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." John explained it all, the trusted partnership with Claire, the forged documents, the investigation, the collapse, the strange individuals searching for answers. Michael listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes. When John finished, Michael nodded slowly and said, "Claire didn't just trick you. She used you as a shield. But if she left traces, and she always did, we can expose the whole structure." For days they worked side by side, sorting through documents, financial records, emails, and reports. Michael brought experts he trusted, a cybersecurity analyst and a former accountant trained to spot hidden patterns. Piece by piece, they uncovered Claire's network of shell companies and false reports. They found the accounts she used, the forged signatures, and the digital trails she had tried to erase. But Michael had one rule. We're not confronting anyone ourselves. We're passing this to the right people, quietly. John agreed. He didn't want revenge. He wanted safety. He wanted truth. He wanted a future for his children without shadows hovering over them. Late one night, after hours of work, Michael sat back and said, "John, this is enough to clear you. But we need to submit it carefully." It was the first real moment of hope John felt since the collapse. He realized he wasn't helpless. He wasn't trapped to repeat his mistakes. He had support again, but this time from someone he should have trusted from the beginning. Michael's team prepared a detailed, anonymous submission for the financial authorities already investigating related fraudulent activity. They didn't mention John's name directly. Instead, they provided the evidence that linked Claire to large-scale financial misconduct. Less than a week later, the effects appeared. Some of Claire's former associates suddenly stopped contacting John. Suspicious cars that used to appear near his apartment no longer showed up. The tension began dissolving, replaced by uncertainty, but not fear. For the first time in months, John could breathe without checking over his shoulder. John focused on rebuilding his work life. He found small consulting clients, not many, but enough to start climbing out of the financial hole. With each project he completed, his confidence returned piece by piece. He visited his children with a clear mind. He answered their questions with honesty. He showed them through action that he was rebuilding. Emma noticed the difference. His steadiness. His consistency. His humility. One evening, as John dropped the children off, Emma said softly, "You seem more grounded. More like yourself?" John nodded. "I'm trying to make sure I never lose that again." The results of the investigation were still months away, but John no longer felt like a man drowning. He felt like someone learning to swim again, one deliberate stroke at a time. As weeks turned into months, John continued working steadily. His new consulting business didn't bring wealth, but it brought stability. Clients appreciated his honesty. His reputation, once damaged, began to rebuild not because of promotion, but because of consistent, dependable work. His visits with Lily and Ethan grew more relaxed. Ethan proudly showed him progress in soccer. Lily drew pictures of their family again, pictures where John still stood beside them. Emma observed all of this with quiet caution. She didn't make promises, but she opened the door a little wider each time John proved himself. She allowed him to help fix things around the house. She invited him to school events. She listened to him with less distance and more trust. One evening, after watching Ethan's soccer game, the children ran ahead toward the car. Emma stood beside John and said, "You're doing a good job. They feel safe with you again." John swallowed, grateful. "I just want them to know I'll never fail them like that again." Emma looked at him gently. "We all make mistakes, John. What matters is what we do after them." They didn't talk about getting back together. They didn't rush anything. They allowed time to guide the healing. John returned to his apartment that night and sat at the table. He took out Lily's newest drawing, a family standing under a bright sun, smiling. Lily had written at the bottom, "Dad is learning to be happy again." John felt a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized he was no longer trying to return to the man he once was. He was becoming someone new, someone wiser, quieter, and more grateful for small moments. Nearly a year after the collapse, John received a letter from the authorities. He opened it with trembling hands. The investigation had concluded. He was cleared of wrongdoing. Evidence proved he had unknowingly signed documents Claire manipulated. His record was restored. John sat down and let the relief wash over him. This wasn't a return to his old life, it was a completely new beginning. With the pressure gone, John registered a new consulting firm. Nothing large. Nothing risky. A simple business built on experience, trust, and transparency. He didn't want rapid growth or risky opportunities. He wanted something sustainable, something that reflected who he was now. Weeks later, during a weekend visit, Ethan asked, "Dad, are you going to be okay now?" John smiled. "Yes, buddy. I am," Lily added excitedly. "Can we draw your new office?" John nodded. "Of course." Emma watched the three of them and smiled softly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes reflected relief and quiet pride. She knew how hard John had worked, not to rebuild wealth, but to rebuild character. To rebuild trust. To rebuild himself. That evening, John returned to his apartment, and placed the children's new drawing on the wall. It showed a small office, a father behind a desk, and two children holding colorful markers beside him. Underneath, Lily had written, "Dad is back, and better than before." John looked at the drawing and exhaled slowly. He no longer wished for the life he lost. He no longer carried shame for the mistakes he made. He no longer feared the future. He had rebuilt his life truthfully, steadily, and humbly. He had regained his family's trust. And for the first time in a long time, he stood firmly on solid ground. John Carter didn't rise again because of luck or wealth. He rose because he never stopped trying to become the man his children believed he could be. And that was the greatest success he had ever achieved.